There's only one reason why I'm not riding today, and that is because Diamond, my poor bike, needs some maintenance. I think the first and most obvious thing is it needs to be washed. I'm certainly not trying to impress anyone with that cleaning job. I just need it to be functional for the next ride. And if you have a white seat cover or even just white grips, I found that using just Simple Green works really well for getting all the dirt out. I kind of left that little smudge, but I didn't really try to wash it that well. Also works really good for grips. And if I don't have Simple Green, then this also works pretty good. Except for if you read the back, it says pretty much use on nothing. I can say it hasn't melted the raw materials off my bike yet. I do have a pretty long checklist today of things that need to be checked, maintained, or even fixed on this bike. So I think that I'm just going to start at the top and work my way down. Can't really get any higher up on the bike than the throttle cable. And I've actually been having an interesting experience with throttle cables lately. So when I rebuilt this engine, I replaced the throttle cable, and then like a month or two later, it snapped while I was riding over at Big Water, which was weird because it was still pretty new and the other one was like 600 hours old. And so I ordered a new one not that long ago and replaced it. And when it arrived, I noticed there was a fray already starting in the top of the cable, like it was already damaged. And I should have sent it back, but I just wanted to ride as soon as possible, so I threw it on and ordered another one, a different brand. The first two were Motion Pro. And that one didn't last for about 2 months. The next one didn't last for me unpackaging it. And so I'm trying a different brand this time. I think it's called All Balls. So there's just that little fray right there, and I could honestly probably cut it off. I just wanted to check, make sure it's not wearing, make sure it's not a weak point in the cable, because if I was going off the face of a jump and the throttle cable snapped and I lost all power, like right off the face of a double, that would be not fun. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. Just cut that off as close to the cable as I could get, and I'll probably check it again in a few weeks just to make sure it's not becoming a weak point. Now while we're up here, we'll go down to the forks, and I'm actually going to start at the bottom of the forks and then work my way back up because I have a seal that's leaking down here. Usually when a fork seal starts leaking, it doesn't mean it's completely blown or ruined. It probably just needs to be cleaned. And usually what makes it leak is debris gets on the fork and then it works its way up into the seals. So if you ride in a lot of mud, then chances are pretty high they're going to start leaking. And it's also good, you can make a good habit of just wiping the fork down before every ride, after every ride, maybe even during a long ride, and it'll probably last a lot longer. Also, another good thing to know is leaving it in the back of a truck where the tie downs are pulling tension on it can actually... Hey! Trying to share some cool information here. Anyways, leaving it in the back of the truck, I've heard can actually create an oval shape on the fork seal because there's always pressure on it. And that will also cause it to leak. So usually whenever I'm riding a lot and I'm just leaving it in the back of my truck, I will, I never really tie it down that tight because it's usually not going to go anywhere. And two, as soon as I park and I'm not driving, I take all the pressure off the straps and just leave it sitting there like that. But even then, if you can just leave it on a stand most of the time, that'll work better. But for me, saving a little bit of time at the moment and riding every day just by leaving it in the back of my truck is worth it, so we'll deal with this. As you can see, this is very dirty. We'll slide this ring down and be careful not to stretch it. And slide the dust seal off. Then I'm gonna use the seal saver. You can also just use like a thin smooth plastic, like plastic from a smart water bottle, or even a tear off, and just cut it into a similar shape. Then just try to slide it around and get all the debris out. I've heard if you use contact cleaner, it can actually cause the seal to rot, so you can either use lubrication or just not use anything, which is what I usually do. And then I put everything back together. And I'll usually clean it a few times once it starts leaking, and if it's still leaking, or if I clean it and then like the next ride it's just pouring out oil, then I'll usually take it to a shop and have them rebuild it. I don't know where you're at in your journey of being a dirt bike mechanic, but throughout this video I'm just going to continue to explain overly simple things, because that's what I would have wanted when I was first starting out and just wanted to have a better idea of what type of maintenance a dirt bike requires. So anyways, moving back up the forks, I'm now bleeding them. She's just letting out the excess air, and I think Bryson already did this because no air is coming out. Oh, never mind. Now they'll just respond and perform a little bit better. And by the way, if you are an experienced mechanic at this point, then feel free to shoot me some tips or leave me any type of advice or tell me anything that I'm doing wrong or could be doing better, because I myself still have a lot to learn. This bike has air forks, and I was about to check the air pressure because over time it leaks air and I have to bring the pressure back up. But it looks like this is out of batteries and I don't have another way to measure how much air pressure is in here. So I'm just gonna add as much air as I usually do when I check the forks. And I better get that battery replaced. Hopefully that wasn't a bad idea. It's starting to get a little warm up, so we're breaking out the pink tank top. Anyways, moving down the bike, we'll go to the air filter. I think it's really dirty. My backup air filter is really dirty. I usually like to keep two. And so they both need to be cleaned. So the air filters are now clean. One has oil on it and is in the bike. By the way, those filters, they were a little bit too dirty. The first filter, I pulled it out a while back and I hadn't checked it, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's a lot worse than it should be. I should have taken that out earlier. And then with this filter today, I opened up and I was like, oh, I didn't think it was gonna be that dirty. Uh-oh. And so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend letting the filters go that long, but I checked the air boot, whatever you want to call it, air intake. There's no sand in there, so I guess we'll probably be okay. By the way, next thing on the agenda is to drain the oil. And normally the way that it's recommended is to start the bike, let it warm up, then let it cool down, and then drain the oil. But honestly, a lot of times I don't do that. I just drain the oil as it is. Supposedly, the only thing that I've heard is that by warming it up, it drains the oil faster. But it takes 5 minutes to warm up and 5 minutes to cool down, and it only takes a minute to drain. Either way, it seems. So like I said, if you're an experienced mechanic and you know more than I do, please tell me if there's any other reasons why I should warm the bike up first, and I'll probably start doing that again. Otherwise, I might not always do it. My poor bike. The last time I drained the oil, I found a tooth from a gear stuck to the magnet. So I was like, oh, well, that might be the end of that bottom end. And so I didn't know. So I texted a friend who's been mechanicking his entire life, and he's like, well, it'll probably be fine. Just run it, and if it starts having issues, then probably do something about it. But until then, I guess there's a gear in there that's missing a tooth, and that's just how it's been running lately. Interesting story about, well, it's probably not that interesting, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Interesting story about this check bolt is it is not the original OEM check bolt. It is just a random screw. I was with my family camping in the mountains, and I was checking the oil to see if it was at the right level. And when I installed the bolt, because of this, there's a spring right here from the brake, I ended up cross-threading it. And I was like, well, I cross-threaded into the engine case. I don't know what that means. Do I need a new engine case? And then that was when I learned from my dad that you can just install a bolt that's a size bigger when you cross-thread something, which is pretty handy. And we just happened to find this random screw up there that fit and fixed the threads, so that's what I use now. And something that I didn't learn until not too long ago, surprisingly, is that the little copper washers that you find on the oil drain bolt, or the check bolt, they usually start leaking after a while, and it's because they need to be replaced after 3 or 4 times of using it. I didn't know that, so I replaced them, and now they don't leak anymore. Pretty cool. And if you're wondering, hey, that's too full because your bike's on a slight angle, I purposely overfill it just a little because I do have some transmission oil leaks at the moment, and so I'd rather have too much oil than not enough. We recently learned something quite valuable when it comes to repacking a silencer. So when we started out riding on a 2-stroke, after so long, the packing in here, it fills full of oil and just doesn't do anything. So it's really loud, it's really heavy, and it's pointless. So you got to replace it, and we got aftermarket packing and tried to repack it ourselves, and we just watched some random guy on YouTube. You know, those random guys on YouTube. And he was saying to pack it in there super tight, and it's kind of a pain, so we were like really packing it in there tight. And after the first ride, the first 3 rides, it was worse than it was before. And we repeated this process like several times until we came to the conclusion like, well, aftermarket packing just doesn't work that well, so we might as well not do it anymore and just buy a whole new silencer when it needs it, because like a stock silencer will usually last maybe 50 to 100 hours, depending on how hot you get it. And it wasn't until just recently that we were talking to a more experienced mechanic, and he said, oh, you don't need to pack it in there super tight. Because when you pack it in there super tight, it gets so tight that the insulation doesn't work. It just fills full of oil really quick on the inside, and then, you know, everything else that's in there doesn't work. And so it's quite pointless. So we ran the experiment, and my brother packed it in there very loose. Lo and behold, it worked. And it's still working. So I haven't repacked a silencer in probably 2 years, and I'm going to try it on this one. See if we have any luck. This bolt is actually also cross-threaded, meaning when I get all the way to the end, if I go just a little bit, if I try to tighten it, you know, more than just like a little bit tight, it just bends and is loose again. And the way that I've been getting around that is just soaking it in red Loctite, and that seems to hold it in place. And your priority is to ride every day on a tight budget. You either fix the problem or you just go around the problem. Either way, you're going to get the desired outcome, which is to have a bike to ride for tomorrow. And this is just one of the problems I've been working around. That sounds so much better. And that is going to be it for this shop day. Hopefully, if you're a little bit newer to dirt bikes or a little bit newer to working on dirt bikes, you got some value from this, just seeing what an average maintenance day can look like. Or if you fit the other side of that coin and you are a very experienced dirt bike mechanic, then please feel free to pass on some knowledge to a younger bike mechanic, being me. Because I know I still got a lot to learn. But when I started out riding and I knew I was gonna have to do some work on my bike, I was absolutely petrified at the idea of touching it with a tool. And just by watching videos of other people go through their day of working on whatever they're doing on their bike, gave me the confidence to get out in the shop and start stripping some bolts and crossing some threads.